Welcome to Bill and Tony's Excellent Adventure in Music. Here are your hosts, Bill Fraser and Tony Sartu.
Welcome to Bill and Tony's Excellent Adventure in Music. I'm Bill.
And I'm Tony.
And we're going to explore our love for music by sharing some facts and our thoughts on some of the best albums of all time.
And today's album is 1984 by Van Halen. It was not listed on the 2003 Rolling Stone Top 500 list. Hey, Bill, don't hurt yourself, man. Bill's doing some DLR kicks in the background.
Got to get my energy up.
Dude, we're going on vacation in 2 days. You can't be in traction while we're in Arizona, man. 1984 was not listed on the Rolling Stone 2003 list. It was not listed on the Rolling Stone 2012 list, nor was it listed on the Rolling Stone 2020 list.
This is a travesty, a miscarriage of justice, I say, sir.
Well, they had 20 years to get it right, so Rolling Stone seems pretty convinced that this isn't amongst the 500 best albums of all time.
Well, I disagree.
All right. Well, you've got a show to make your case, sir.
That I will do.
Well, then why don't we begin with our personal histories? Usually I go first here, but how about you make your case, Counselor Fraser?
1984, followed by 5150, and two other albums by Diamond Dave, Eat 'Em and Smile, and Skyscraper, were legitimately the soundtrack of my teenage years. Okay. So if I had a montage film of my age 13 to 17, I would splice it to tracks from this album, 5150, Eat 'Em and Smile, and Skyscraper. That was my jam. Like I had the cassettes, I wore them out. You know when you listen to a cassette so much that you warp it and it doesn't play right? I actually had to buy this cassette again.
Now I think we're getting to the root cause of why 35 years have gone by before we realized we could talk about music. Maybe this DLR Van Halen obsession was burned on my brain. I was just like, well, I can't talk to that guy about music. But my personal, and I joke because I actually like Van Halen. Van Halen is okay. 5150, that's a great album. I would have loved to have done this show on 5150.
Dude, 5150 is an awesome album. I will gladly do it another season. So if I sign me up for doing a 5150 episode. Love that album. Today we're talking about 1984.
Well, so as far as why Van Halen just didn't click in for me is I was never a Guitar Hero guy. And I don't mean the video game. I just mean I didn't get super excited by guys who could do these extended solos and whatever. I mean, I guess I appreciated their dexterity and creativity, but it just wasn't something that got me excited. And perfect illustration of that, as you well know, and our friend Bernadette, and who was our fourth for the time Jamie. I fell asleep?
Jamie. Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, tell the story.
Madison Square Garden. It was the OU 812 tour. We have seats, probably not great seats, but decent seats. And Eddie's in the middle of his guitar solo. I'm like in heaven. I turn and, expect to see Tony smiling or something. Mouth open, drool coming out. He's asleep, dead. Stone cold asleep.
Yeah, not nodding off, whatever. I was out. Because 10 minutes in, it's just like the Stairway to Heaven. It's just enough already.
Dude, Eddie's playing Eruption and you fall asleep. I mean, for goodness freaking sake.
So, well, anyway, to each his own, but that's our personal histories, right?
That it is.
Okay, so next segment is the listener comments. So I've got a couple of comments spanning a couple of different shows. So going back to our Taylor Swift Red show, Jessie at the College of New Jersey was a lifelong Taylor fan, and she was expecting that, oh yeah, these old guys, they're not going to have anything that I don't know. She didn't know a single thing that we had for the Something I Don't Know.
All right. We did all right. I'm proud of us.
Pats on the back. Art in Hoboken, he said that his crew referred to Led Zeppelin 4 as Four Symbols. So that wasn't a title that we
Not
yeah,
Zoso, not the Untitled, not
not
that's interesting.
runes.
Yeah.
Yep. So
Yeah.
Four Symbols. I hadn't, and in the research I had done, I hadn't come across Four Symbols
I
either. So
I agree. Yeah, I hadn't seen that either.
so good job, Art and crew. And then finally, Ari in Westchester County requested. We got our. I don't know if this is our first, but this is the first that I remember. Requested a show on the Native Tongues Collective.
Sign me up. De La Soul, A Tribe Called Quest, the Jungle Brothers, that Native Tongues movement was phenomenal. There was a lot of amazing things going on in hip hop in the 90s.
All right, cool. So, do I hear then that maybe season 3 will be doing some De La?
So I think we need to do De La because as of March 3rd, 3 is the magic number. De La Soul is available to stream anywhere you listen. So we were very hesitant to do anything De La Soul until they were on streaming. But now that they are, I'm all in.
All right. So, Ari from Westchester County, you might be getting your wish in season 3. Bonus request was from Burtis in Hunterdon County, wanted to know when we're going to do Black Sheep. So, Burtis, I think you're going to be waiting.
I think, yeah, I think I'm going to pass on that one.
So, those are our listener comments.
All right, so everybody, we would love to hear from you. Thank you to those who have reached out and given us feedback. You can email us, bill@bntexcellent.com, tony@bntexcellent.com. Our social media, we're Bill and Tony Pod on both Instagram and Twitter, and we're BNT Excellent on Facebook. So please find us, reach out to us. We love to hear from you.
We really do. It's such a blast.
All right, Tony, I know you're chomping at the bit here. Why don't you share an update and some news for our listeners?
We were so excited to be doing a show on Van Halen 1984 that we decided to wrangle up some bonus content for you.
So next week, we're going to be sharing an episode that we recorded with author Greg Renoff. Greg wrote the book Van Halen Rising, How a Southern California Backyard Party Band Saved Heavy Metal. And it was a lot of fun talking to Greg about Van Halen. He is so knowledgeable, and I think our listeners are really going to enjoy it.
We're super excited for everyone to hear the interview, but we do have some business to take care of first. So, Bill, can you tell us about what was going on in 1984?
Oh, Tone, we were 13. I had my half shirt on. literally, I had the half shirt sitting by the pool with my Sony Walkman, listening to 1984. 1984 was a leap year, okay? And Ronald Reagan, we've talked about 84 before, so I'm not going to go too deep. Ronald Reagan's the president. He beats Mondale in a landslide. The economy was really coming back from a recession. The Cold War's in full swing. There's a lot of tension between Russia and the US. The Soviet Union boycotts the LA Olympics after we had boycotted the Moscow Olympics. The AIDS epidemic is really continuing to spread, and awareness of it is growing significantly. It's in the media a lot more. It's front and center. And in science, DNA fingerprinting was developed in 1984. A lot was going on in sports. We've talked about it before. Winter Olympics in Sarajevo, Summer Olympics in LA. You've got the Super Bowl where the Raiders beat the Redskins and Marcus Allen rushes for almost 200 yards. The World Series where Kirk Gibson's 2 home runs lead the Tigers over to the Padres, and the Celtics with Larry Bird as the MVP beat the Lakers in the finals.
All right, so then that takes us to the movies. So, we've talked about these movies before, but the top 5 movies were Ghostbusters was number 1. Then we've got Beverly Hills Cop. And then we've got number 3.
I'm not going to do Axel F. I'm not going to. I
thought you weren't going to do it. Number 3, and this one is actually relevant today in a weird way. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
It is. It's very relevant.
So, well, why do you say?
Oh no, go ahead. I don't want to steal your thunder. You were gonna talk it.
No, well, for me, it's because I was watching Everything Everywhere All at Once. I'm saying
exactly.
I'm saying, dang, that guy looks familiar.
Short Round.
And sure enough, Short Round's he's one of the major players in that movie, and he does a wonderful job. So
he won the Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor.
Oh, did he? Oh, good for him.
He was. It was a wonderful speech. It really was.
I didn't see it because the Globes are sketchy at best. But
Well, I just saw the highlight when they showed him so excited, and I had to listen. It was cool.
he did such a great job in that movie. He might have been the heart of that movie, even though clearly Michelle Yeoh and the daughter were the stars of the movie, and JLC stole the movie, but he did a great job.
Well, and just a phenomenal movie. So if you haven't seen it, go watch it. Great movie.
Number 4 was Gremlins, which I still haven't seen.
You haven't seen Gremlins?
No.
Oh.
And then number 5, The Karate Kid, which, even if you're not watching Cobra Kai, The Karate Kid both doesn't hold up and is great anyway.
Karate Kid's awesome.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's awesome. I mean, it's there's a lot of problems, but it's still
so
great.
80s though. It's so 80s. Like The Karate Kid is the 80s.
And does Liz Shue look just as great now at 58 as she did when she was, in The Karate Kid?
She doesn't look 58, like at all. So
she's nuts. She's great. Amazing.
All right. So Tone, you covered the movies. Let me cover TV. There was a lot going on in TV in 1984, and it really starts with two big primetime soap operas. First, let me ask you the question.
Yeah.
If I say 80s primetime soap opera, Tone, which one do you go to? Which is your go-to 80s primetime soap opera?
I didn't know you were going to ask me this, but this is a great prompt. So the answer has to be Dynasty. But the weird thing is that as a younger kid, so not quite 84, but like maybe 82, 83, I wanted to be JR. I mean, that's what I would tell my parents when they, what do you want to be? I want to be JR. So, and we lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the time. We even did a road trip down to Texas and visited the actual South Fork Ranch where the show is supposed to be based. And spoiler, the real South Fork Ranch is like 2,500 square feet. I mean, it's got acres and acres, but it's a small ranch. It's not like, this, 4,000, 5,000, or however big it was on the show. So I was a big fan of Dallas, don't get me wrong, but Dynasty was absolutely my jam. You?
Before I answer that question, I have to ask you, are you team Crystal or are you team Alexis?
Alexis. Come on. Crystal's such a wet rag.
Wet blanket.
Wet blanket. Thanks. Crystal. Who was anybody team Crystal? Who's not team Alexis?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so. So, all right. So obviously the two big shows were Dynasty and Dallas. And I would say Dynasty, 100% Dynasty. It was definitely the one I would see more. I mean, I remember watching the Who Shot JR Dallas episode. Like, I remember where I was. I was staying at my grandmother's house. My sister and I were sleeping over at my grandmother's house. And my grandmother let us, watch TV late. And I was watching Dallas and I wanted to see Who Shot JR. And I had no idea what the heck was going on. But yeah, Dynasty.
Not on this list, but really, really important for me was the Dallas spinoff Knots Landing. So
Really?
Huge Knots Landing fan. Because first of all, Alec Baldwin, that was his first time he really popped because he was the young preacher who,
I didn't even know he was on Knots Landing.
So that's where he started. Young preacher, and you can figure out the rest of his story from there. And then one of my very earliest crushes, because I'm talking 12, 13 years old, Lisa Hartman, who would later go on to marry Clint Black. So Lisa Hartman Black, I think they're still together. She debuted on that show, and oh my gosh, definitely one of my, Olivia Newton-John and Lisa Hartman, first two crushes. So Knots Landing, Dallas spinoff.
She's no CJ from Matt Houston. I'm sorry. So,
Never watched Matt Houston.
All right. All right. So number 3, The Cosby Show, obviously big show. And that was the debut year for The Cosby Show. So the start of a big run for NBC of kind of owning that Thursday night television. 60 Minutes, number 4. And then Family Ties, which was a phenomenal show with Michael J. Fox playing Alex P. Keaton.
Other TV shows of note from 1984, there's Night Court, which just got rebooted this year. Have you checked it out? I haven't checked it out yet.
I have. I watched a couple, and it's worth checking out. It's if you're looking for something kind of just mindless, funny, it was enjoyable.
Then we've got Murder She Wrote, we've got Miami Vice, and Airwolf.
With who?
I don't know.
Wasn't that Jan Michael Vincent?
I don't know. Is he?
Oh, I'm sure it was Jan Michael Vincent. Jan Michael Vincent is still in the popular.
Is he?
Yes, because he's huge on he's brought up all the time on Rick and Morty.
Oh.
Like Jan Michael Vincent is brought up all the time on Rick and Morty.
So suppose I don't watch Rick and Morty. Is Jan Michael Vincent still huge?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's enough about TV. So we go to the year in music. So we've already covered this year a couple of times, so we'll kind of breeze through this. There were only 5 number one albums in 1984. Thriller was number one for the first 15 weeks. Footloose, the soundtrack, was number one for the next 10. Huey Lewis in Sports was number one for a week. Born in the USA for 4 weeks. Purple Rain came in for a long 22-week run. And then Bruce returned to the top for the end of the year. So those were your number one albums for 1984. Anything else you want to note there?
I think the main things I would go are just kind of the ones on the periphery. Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Billy Ocean, and Hall & Oates' Big Bang Boom. So those would be the ones that I would go to. Check them out.
And then we've got our top 10 singles: When Doves Cry, What's Love Got to Do with It, Say, 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 Footloose, Against All Odds. And then coming in at number 6 is Jump from Van Halen. Number 7 is Hello from Lionel Richie.
Hello.
Then we've got Owner of a Lonely Heart by Yes, Ghostbusters by Ray Parker Jr. from the soundtrack, and Karma Chameleon by Culture Club. Some other notables were Jump for My Love by the Pointer Sisters. So Jump having a big year. You've got 99 Lift Balloons at number 28. Borderline by Madonna. One of my 3 favorite Madonna songs is Borderline. And
Really?
Oh yeah.
Good song. Good song.
Good, not great.
That was a good song. I like it. I like Madonna. Madonna's awesome.
Number 49 is this is an important song to some of our friends from Manalapan. Shannon, Let the Music Play.
Let the music play. You won't get away.
Apparently, this is like one of the early songs from that whole sort of New York, New Jersey
Dance club music. Absolutely.
Miami club music scene. So Let the Music Play. Great song. Still hear it all the time. And then Thriller. This one was weird. Thriller from Michael Jackson, number 78. You might wonder, well, why is that such a big deal? Thriller came out in 1982, and the song is the number 78 song from 1984. So, boy, talk about a lasting impact, right?
Crazy run. Yep.
All right, so that's the year in music.
All right, so Tone, why don't we talk a little bit about 1984, the album? 1984 was released on January 9th, 1984, and it was their 6th studio album. It took them about 4 months to record, and it was recorded at 5150 Studios. The producer was Ted Templeman, who's worked with Van Halen on all of their albums to that point, and it was engineered by Don Landy, who'd also worked with Van Halen on previous albums, and he used a technique called varispeeding, which altered the pitch and tempo of some of the tracks, which you can kind of hear on some of the tracks. The classic original Van Halen lineup: David Lee Roth on lead vocals, Eddie Van Halen on guitars, keyboards, and backing vocals, Michael Anthony on bass, and really an underrated background vocal singer. Michael Anthony is really underappreciated.
Very good harmonies.
And Alex Van Halen on drums and percussion. And I'll just mention that this album is very synthesizer heavy, and the synthesizer playing a big part in this album. I wanted to just mention that they actually used a special synthesizer on this album, the Oberheim OBXA synthesizer. And it was kind of a crazy new synthesizer that had a lot of new capabilities, and it was actually something that wound up being used a lot, and it was used by artists like Prince, Queen, Rush, Depeche Mode, and Madonna.
So what I found interesting about this and doing the research was that, not knowing the background of the band, but having a sense that, or coming at it from the assumption that, well, Eddie's the guitar hero and David, is more into like the pop songs because, he likes to do the covers of the old songs. So I kind of thought that maybe that, that breakup and that friction in the band was Dave wanting to move more pop, and it couldn't have been more opposite. Dave hated the synthesizers.
It was Eddie.
Yeah, it
Eddie
was
wanted
all
to
Eddie.
bring the synthesizers in. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So that was a surprising thing to learn. I'm sure we're going to talk a lot more about that push and pull with the between Dave and Ed and all that as we get into the track. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the album art?
So this is an iconic 80s album cover. You've got the picture of the angel baby smoking a cigarette against the background, and it's basically a striking image. It's something where, in the UK, they actually had to put a sticker over the cigarette label because they weren't allowed to show it on the album cover. So it was, it was an interesting album cover, and it's been parodied a couple times, and it's been, something where it's really in the imagery of the 80s.
I know we talk about memorable album covers, and that's more relevant in the older ones because that's things that have been cemented over decades. But when I think about the 80s, I can't think of too many more memorable album covers than this one.
No, it's a standout album cover, and it's like when I think of the Van Halen album covers, I can only really picture two of them
Sure.
perfectly.
Yeah,
This
5150 and
one and
this one. Yeah.
5150.
All right, cool. Thanks a lot for that, Bill. So I'm going to get to my something you might not know. I'm going to talk a little bit about 5150 Studios, which you mentioned earlier, where they recorded this album. So 5150 Studios was built prior to the making of this album, and it was just Eddie's garage, basically. He wanted a place where he could lay down better demo tracks because before he was doing it like in his kitchen or something, and they were kind of crummy, and he wanted to do better demos. So he started building out a studio space, but then him and Don Landy just started to get a little bit, more into it, and they ended up building out technically good studio space. It was small, but it had great equipment. It didn't have new equipment, but it had really good equipment. Their mixing board was one that had been used previously by the Beach Boys and the Mamas and the Papas, amongst other artists. So they really had some cool tech in there, but it was a really small space, and it was really initially just supposed to be for demos. But maybe Ed had something else in the back of his mind, because what was happening was he wanted more control. And Ted and Dave, they like to work fast and really run through albums, and Ed wanted to take his time and build things out. And by recording in his garage, he was able to have a little bit more control. He was able to keep them out. So that's the origin of 5150. Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you gave a great background of 5150, and it's really just so instrumental to everything they made from that point forward effectively. Like it was a huge part of their process.
For Van Halen, the band, but
For Van Halen, the band,
right.
yes.
The thing is like the creation of that studio really was what precipitated the breakup of the classic lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the tipping point, 100%. Yes.
All right, so that's mine. What do you got?
All right, I got a few for us today, Tone. So this is like my sweet spot. So I'm gonna hit you with a couple today. I'm gonna start with Eddie and Alex, and some of this you might know, you might not know, but I'm gonna start with Eddie and Alex. So Eddie and Alex were actually born in Amsterdam. Their father was Dutch and their mother was Indonesian, and they moved to California in, I think it was '62, and they were 7 and 9 years old, and they didn't speak English when they came to the US.
Wild.
So they were 7 and 9 years old and they did not speak English at all. And they were really discriminated against as mixed race children. So they had a tough time when they came to California in the 60s. And their dad was a jazz musician and he taught them to play piano. And they learned classic music, and they learned the Beatles, they learned the Stones, and they got into playing different instruments. And originally, Eddie was the drummer. Eddie had drums, and Alex was the guitarist.
Really?
And what happened was Eddie caught Alex secretly playing his drum kit, and he's like, "You're better than me." And they switched. And so Eddie became the guitarist, and Alex became the drummer.
Really? Oh, that's
Yep.
wild. The other thing I came across was that Eddie always wanted to be a sax player too.
Yep.
And
But I don't know if he actually ever tried it or not. I couldn't really find too much on that. All right, so that's a little bit about them as a background. Now let's talk about the start of the band a bit. So, Tone, do you know anything about when Van Halen was first signed? Have you heard any of the backstory on this?
no, not a thing.
All right, so in 1977, an artist you might have heard before, he goes by the name of Gene Simmons, was in a club in LA, and he hears this young band playing. And he goes backstage and says, I want to sign you guys. You're amazing. I'm going to sign you personally, and I'm going to convince my bandmates and our label that we're going to produce you. He flies them out to New York, and this band, by the way, is Van Halen. He flies them out to New York. He does a demo tape with them, and then he proceeds to beg his bandmates in Kiss and the recording management, the recording studio and management that Kiss works with, to sign and produce Van Halen. And he can't convince any of them to sign and produce Van Halen. So he tore up their contract and let them go. And then shortly later, they signed with Warner Brothers.
That seems so impossible to believe that Kiss, at the peak of their powers, Gene Simmons couldn't get a band signed to the label, even just as a favor.
I read the articles, but I've also listened to Gene Simmons' interviews about it. And his revisionist story about it basically goes this way: that it wasn't that they didn't see the talent in Van Halen. It was that they didn't want Gene distracted. And they basically said, if Gene is focused on this band, Kiss isn't going anywhere. We got to build the Kiss brand, not the Van Halen brand. Let somebody else sign those guys. So it was less about the fact that they didn't like Van Halen and more about the fact that they didn't want distraction for Gene.
Hey, I don't know how the business works. That does feel a little revisionist history. I mean, they couldn't sign them and just
I find it mind-blowing.
They could have had somebody else. It's not like Gene was going to manage them, right? They could have signed them and said, okay, yeah, but we're going to hook them up with this producer or that producer.
Well, the way that he says is like they were worried that he was going to get too involved and want to manage them, and so. But he makes a big deal about it. I could have had Van Halen money, and obviously, he doesn't need Van Halen money. All right, so that's a couple. I got two more for you. Tapping. Okay, we're going to talk about tapping when we get to the tracks. Obviously, a lot of synthesizers on this album, but tapping is the technique that is probably something Eddie Van Halen is most famous for. It's a technique where you're basically playing the guitar with two hands on the frets and you're tapping the frets effectively. And when you hear about tapping, a lot of people attribute tapping to Eddie Van Halen, and he's the creator of it, the progenitor of it, and whatnot. Well, that's not true. So in the Something You Might Not Know, Eddie was definitely a big contributor to making tapping more popular, but Jimmy Page tapped. He tapped on Heartbreaker. The lead guitarist for Genesis tapped. Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top tapped on songs like LaGrange and Beer Drinkers and Hellraisers. And others, like Joe Satriani, said, I was tapping at the same time Eddie was, and I'd never heard him play. So there were a lot of people who gravitated towards that. And candidly, there were jazz guitarists back in the 50s that were doing it as well. So it wasn't something that was created by Eddie, but it was something that Eddie obviously made famous and popular. And then the last one is just, I always get a chuckle from this one. Do you ever hear about the Van Halen tour rider?
No, not them specifically, no.
All right, so Van Halen is famous for their tour rider. And they had this huge, long list of demands, and somewhere buried in, I don't know, page 12 or something like that, or whatever, the band basically outlined how at every concert they required a bowl of M&Ms backstage, and that it could absolutely not contain brown M&Ms. They also demanded 12 Reese's peanut butter cups and 12 assorted Dannon yogurts. But if they in the rider, they said if they showed up and there were brown M&Ms in the bowl, the venue could forfeit, and basically the contract was null and void. Subsequent interviews that I've heard David Lee talk about it, basically it was a check to see the diligence of the promoters. So they put it in their rider basically to see if they got backstage and they saw that brown M&Ms were in the bowl, they knew they needed to double check and triple check everything they asked for. If they got backstage and they saw there were no brown M&Ms in the bowl, they said, you know what? they followed this contract pretty well. We're still going to check, but it doesn't have to be the, double, triple check. So, when they go to the sound setup and everything, they could have a little bit more confidence of what was actually there.
That's actually shockingly smart. It's basically an early warning system.
Yeah, I thought it was a brilliant strategy. So, and I've heard other artists do it as well, but they were the first ones that I've heard that did it. And they might not have been the first, but they were the first ones I'd heard.
All right, cool. Anything else?
No, I think we'll move on to the tracks themselves and talk there.
So then we've got 9 songs on this album, and again, a point that we've been hammering over the last 2 seasons: 33 minutes and 17 seconds.
Just an amazingly concise album, just perfection.
I haven't listened to this album in 30 years, but in the last week or so, I've listened to this album 20 times, and I've never gotten to the end and said, oh, that's it?
Yep.
And, I love Taylor, but I don't need 65 minutes of your album. Figure it out, get it down, have some self-control.
Yeah, I love the 30 to 45 minute album that's got a story to tell. It's knit together well, and all the tracks belong there.
So track 1 is 1984. It's a 1-minute instrumental, and it's really it's almost like a mission statement, if you will. It's not that they'd never used any synthesizers before, but this is essentially a synthesizer intro.
It sets the stage that this is what this album is going to be about. Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great intro. Like it's a great synthesizer intro. I mean, it's a sweeping, epic intro, and then you get the guitars at the end. It's a great intro.
Indeed. So it's telling us what we need to know about what we're about to experience. And then you go from that 1-minute intro.
Well, before we go to the next song, let me just say that, you go back to 1984 and there were not a lot of rock bands using synthesizers at the time. Like
almost none.
There were, yes, almost none. You were not getting a rock band to use a synthesizer, especially in the way that they did on this album. So this is really groundbreaking in what it brought to music.
Yeah, and I was reading that after the success of 1984, the music stores, or the guitar stores really, which primarily had guitars and drums, all of a sudden had to dedicate significant floor space to keyboards and synthesizers. And a lot of that is due to Eddie in this album.
Yep.
So we go from 1984, that musical intro, to Jump, the second track on this album,
which is just like the upbeat anthem and of the year. Basically it's this just crazy high energy song that you've got, emblazoned in your brain, David Lee Roth doing the crazy, karate kick, singing the song, right? I mean, like, when you hear the song, do you see David Lee doing that kick? I do.
Of course. And the funny thing is that David Lee and Templeman, the producer, hated it when they first heard the music for it, because it just wasn't Van Halen.
It was an unused clip, I believe, right? I mean, it was something where they, like, I think Eddie had been playing with something, and like it was an unused clip, and they were listening to it and going, "What do we do with this?" or something along those lines.
So then, when he composed the music for Jump and presented it as something that he wanted on the album, they're saying, "We don't like this," and I think Templeman even said something along the lines of, "You just made like a song that's going to be played at every baseball park in America," and sure enough, it was, and it probably still is.
Well, according to Daryl Hall and John Oates, supposedly Eddie said that he kind of copied the synth part from Kiss on My List and worked it into Jump.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's a early Voices 1982 Hall and Oates a favorite of Rick and mine. So I got to go back and listen to that.
You can hear it. There's like little nuances to it. It's pretty cool.
If you imagine like the electronic keyboard of Kiss on My List, but then throw in some heavy synth.
Exactly.
All right. Love it. So this was their, obviously their most successful single. It was their only number 1 single. And like you were saying, it was just an enormous hit. So, so Ed is holed up and he's working on this for weeks. And then finally it comes out, Dave doesn't like it. Ted doesn't like it, but they agree. Okay, fine, we'll do it. And do you know how Dave, the process by which Dave ended up writing the lyrics for this, as well as a lot of his other songs?
I've seen some stuff, and I'm not sure how true it is, but it's definitely kind of an interesting story. So go ahead.
It makes
go ahead, Tone.
It reminded me of Lincoln Lawyer. I didn't see the movie, but I watched the TV show. And Lincoln Lawyer, he's a lawyer, and he hires a driver, usually an ex-con, to drive him around while he like studies his case files. Well, supposedly Dave wrote the lyrics to Jump while he was being driven around by a roadie in one of his cars. And they're driving around LA and they've got the radio on, and they hear a news report of a man threatening to jump off a building, and they kind of swing by and they check out the scene, and Dave is inspired, and that's how we got the lyrics to this song.
And supposedly he said, "Go ahead and jump," and that's yeah.
So, I mean, I hope the guy didn't jump, but
I hope the guy didn't jump also, but great song.
uh,
Thank you for the inspiration. Inspiration comes from a lot of places.
You never know, right? You never know.
Yeah.
So, anything else on Jump?
Just an awesome, awesome song. The guitar riff is famous. The synthesizers are worked in a lot, so it's very synthesizer heavy. You go from the synthesizer from '84 into the synthesizer in Jump, and synthesizer with the guitar work together very tightly. It's really kind of the model for this album. You go from synthesizer to synthesizer guitar overlay, and it's really the model for the album.
I had to listen closely because the synthesizer is so prominent and so catchy and such an earworm that I actually forget that there's guitar in the song.
Yep. That takes us to track 3. And track 3 is a classic Van Halen song. It's another hit single from Van Halen. It didn't go as high as Jump, but it reached top 20, and it's Panama. Any thoughts on Panama?
To me, it's classic David because it's nonsensical and
come on, you're killing me.
And but a freaking blast. It's a blast. And there's a place in the world for just fun rock and roll that's meaninless.
It's fun rock and roll, exactly.
Yeah.
It's fun rock and roll.
I didn't mean nonsensical as a dig. I just meant like the words themselves don't matter. It's the delivery.
The spoken word stuff that he does is so freaking cool. Like, yeah, we're running a little bit hot tonight. I can barely see the road from the heat coming on. Reach down between my legs, ease the seat back. It's so freaking cool.
Well, actually, now that you're doing your DLR, it reminds me of something that I saw, talking about his writing process. And have you ever heard him or read him talk about his writing process?
I don't think so, no.
So his process is inspired by the Boss.
Really?
But not by the way the Boss works. It's inspired by Thunder Road, the lyrics to Thunder Road. He quotes Thunder Road when he talks about how he writes. He says, sometimes you just gotta roll the wind back and let the wind blow back your hair. And that's why, he's writing songs in the backseat of his car while he's being driven around. He's living the Thunder Road life while he's writing lyrics.
Well, but you've got that dichotomy of Eddie with the synthesizers and really getting, taking them in that direction, and David Lee with the, his childhood idols were Al Jolson and Louis Prima and Ray Charles, and you can hear, if you listen to a Louis Prima album, David Lee covered Louis Prima songs on his solo albums, after Van Halen. You can hear just a lot of the spoken word stuff that Louis Prima does is exactly in David Lee Roth's written lyrics, a lot of it.
Yeah, and that's really also another cause of that friction, because they did a lot of covers on their earlier albums, and Ed hated them because he said, I want to make my own music. And Dave would say, well, we're Van Halenizing these songs, so we're making them our own. And I think you and I both agree that there is something to that, but we're not the songwriters. So Ed doesn't want to Van Halenize somebody else's song. He wants to write Van Halen songs.
It was definitely a lot of push and pull between the two of them. So Panama has got just amazing guitar and drum work on it. Panama is one of those songs for me that is just powerful in the music. I understand what you're saying about the lyrics, and it's David Lee being David Lee with the lyrics.
Sure.
But the guitar and drum work on this are just outrageous.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's a fantastic song. And also, how about do you know anything about the Lamborghini?
I don't know anything about the Lamborghini. I know about the car. I know about the car, but I didn't know it was a Lamborghini.
There's a couple of spots in the musical in like the bridge or the instrumentation section where you actually hear the sound of engine revving, and it's kind of high pitched, and I don't know what Lamborghini is supposed to sound like, so I didn't realize that it was uh, you know you know a fine tuned high end sports car. But that whirring engine sound was Ed pulling up his Lamborghini to the front of 5150, and they mic'd it up, and he just
That's awesome.
started uh, revving the engine, and that's the sound that you hear in the musical interlude.
So I actually thought you were going in a different direction with it. So that's awesome. I did remember that they did something, but I didn't know it was Eddie's Lamborghini that they recorded.
Yeah.
Where I thought you were going was what the song is named after was a car that David Lee saw in a race in Vegas called the Panama Express. So it's about a car, and specifically he saw this car in a race in Vegas and stuck in his head.
There you go. Two somethings neither of us knew about Panama.
There you go.
All right, so track 4 is Top Jimmy.
He cooks and he swings. He's got the looks. Top Jimmy, he's the king.
I feel like Top Jimmy could easily have gone on a David Lee Roth solo album.
Agreed. But I love David Lee's solo stuff and I love Van Halen stuff. So I'm not one to say, oh, that shouldn't be on because I think there are some Van Halen fans that would be like, oh, that's more David Lee, blah blah blah, and I like all of it. So I really love this song, and I feel like it's a fun song. It's an upbeat rock song. You've got the cool harmonized vocals. That's Michael Anthony shines on this song, and it's an awesome song.
Yeah, I similar to Panama. I didn't mean that as a dig. It's a great song. And it's not a dig to say that you could imagine this on a David Lee Roth solo album, but I really could.
You're right. You're spot on. It's just I know that maybe I'm not the prototypical Van Halen fans. I mean, some people feel strongly about whether it should or shouldn't be, and whether David or Sammy. I like them both. I like it all. So,
all right. So, anything else on Top Jimmy?
No, I think we covered Top Jimmy.
All right. So let's go on to track 5, Drop Dead Legs. I'll tell you, this song, it wasn't one when I was going into this that I even remembered, but as I was listening to it over and over again, I kept coming to this one. This is a really cool song.
The way that it builds, it's got this slow groove, and it just builds. It's so cool. It's a cool rock song.
Yeah, I really like that, and it's kind of a talking about how Top Jimmy is a DLR sounding song. This one isn't. This gives you a little bit more of that power, hard rock, heavy metal sound that Top Jimmy doesn't quite give you. And it's just that really cool groove. Do you know the inspiration for the lyrics?
I don't, but I believe it was something movie starlet, some sort, but I didn't know specifically who.
So apparently David Lee Roth is really into old movies, which isn't a surprise given what his musical inclinations are. And he has this connection to Some Like It Hot, starring Marilyn Monroe. But in particular, there's a scene apparently, and I haven't seen
Train
the
Station.
movie. Yeah, train station scene where
it's one of my top 5 movies of all time. Some Like It Hot is one of my top 5 movies of all time.
Okay, so then I'll set it up, but you tell me what you remember about it. Like she's walking next to the train with the violin case.
Yep, it's one of the most famous scenes in movie history. It's Marilyn Monroe, Tony Curtis, Jack Lemmon. Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis are like the original bosom buddies, dressing like women to get away from the mob. And they're running to get on this train, and they see Marilyn Monroe walking up. You see Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis dressed like women walking to the train, and they see Marilyn Monroe walking, and every person turns their head to see Marilyn Monroe, and the train, the steam from the train blows her skirt up, and you see her.
That's where the skirt scene comes from.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. So Drop Dead Legs is inspired by Marilyn and Some Like It Hot.
Can't say that I'm surprised, but yeah, I should have put two and two together on that one.
So great song. And speaking of incredibly attractive women, let's go to track 6, Hot for Teacher.
So I think Hot for Teacher, just like I said with Jump, there are things that are just indelibly imprinted on my memory and my brain. When you hear things, sometimes when you see something, you smell something, you hear something, like you get a memory, right? When I hear this song, I instantly go to the music video for it. And I can play the music video in my head listening to the song. So when we were listening to the album this week to do prep for this, every single time I was listening to the song, I was playing the music video in my head because I've seen it so many times, and it's such a classic, amazing music video. And the guitar solo and the drum solo in this song are probably my top 10, both solos. I think both solos are top 10 for me in like anything. And just an outrageous song. Amazing, amazing, amazing song. A fun song, makes you laugh, makes you smile. The video makes you crack up with Waldo and the teacher and the little Van Halen, characters, kids that they made like themselves to kind of play the Van Halen characters. Just a great video and a great song.
This album came out at a really good time when MTV, it wasn't super early. It wasn't like the first days of MTV, but it was when MTV was already clearly, an important part of the music business, and they embraced it. Some bands didn't want to do it or didn't play along. These guys made great videos, and I think that it only helped enhance the popularity of some of these songs.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think this song in particular took off because of the music video. I mean, it's a great song, don't get me wrong,
Sure.
but I think the music video like kicked it over the top. And for me, it's one of the things that changed over the years is, the way that MTV stopped doing music videos and started putting content out. And for me, I stopped watching at that point. So like it was one of the fun things about MTV. Just go sit and listen to music and watch these little vignette stories about a song, and it was awesome. And that doesn't exist anymore on that level. I mean, you can go watch it on Vivo, and artists still make videos, but it's not the same.
Yeah, and I've been wondering about that. I was just thinking about that the other day. I don't know why it's not the same, because everyone still makes music videos.
Yep.
And a lot of them are high quality with people who go on to be
with serious directors and serious actors and actresses. Yeah, absolutely.
So the videos are still being made, and somebody's watching them. So basically, people are watching them. It's just not us.
Yeah, I mean, I think they go for viral factor. So they go to see that they get streamed virally somehow because of something in it. But it's not, you can't just sit and watch it easily. Like, I mean, well, let me take that back. I'm dating myself. You can absolutely sit and watch it easily.
Sure.
I just don't.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's there. We can do it. We just don't. And I don't know why that happened, but it's true. One note on Hot for Teacher. So two notes, a question and a comment. I don't remember for sure, but in the Taylor Hawkins tribute concerts, Wolfie performed. What songs did he perform?
It depends on which concert. So he did different songs in London than he did in LA. He did do Hot for Teacher, though.
Did he also do Panama?
He did. He did Panama and Hot for Teacher, yes.
And those are the ones that I remember seeing. And I feel like there's a reason, because those songs kick ass.
Oh, they're amazing, amazing songs. Yeah. I mean, and specifically, as far as rock songs go, if you want to rock out, there is no, like, okay, have you played Guitar Hero? There is no more fun song to try to play on Guitar Hero than Hot for Teacher. Really? No more fun song. No more fun song. It's damn near impossible.
Yeah.
Like, especially if you play on like any kind of like not starter level. Mm-hmm. But there is no more fun song to try to play on Guitar Hero than Hot for Teacher.
And the comment I was going to make was, as I was coming up to record tonight, Colleen said, "Oh, Hot for Teacher. Does that make you think of your Senora Thomas from high school?" I had to tell her that no, Senor Thomas was 1988. This album came out in 1984. So it's a little before her time. But Kim Thomas, Kim Young, if you're listening, which I'm sure you're not, if you know Kim Thomas or Kim Young, let her know that she got a shout out for Hot for Teacher.
So the other thing I would say about this song, and I didn't know this until I was doing research, is the end part, the part after they say, "Oh my God," where they
Hmm.
do the kind of closeout.
Yeah.
It's actually, it comes from a demo song that they never released. So they had this song Voodoo Queen that they did early on, and you can listen to it online if you YouTube it. I'll put the clip in the show notes. It's actually a cool listen. It's a cool song. It's very David Lee. So to the the David Lee of it, you can kind of hear, like, you can hear him. But the end of it is the end of this song. So they stole the ending from that song and they used it for Hot for Teacher.
And just from reading about this one album, it does seem like that's a way that they work, is that they have bits and pieces that they've collected
Yep.
over time, and then they find places to use them and drop them
Yep.
in here and there. It's not even necessarily the whole song, but it's just something that they use.
Very much so. Very much so. Whether it's a lyric that David Lee had, or it's a synthesizer piece, or a guitar riff, or a drum bit, or something. Yes, 100%. That's the way that they worked on this album. It's the way they worked a lot.
All right. Anything else for Hot for Teacher?
No, well, just on the video, the voice of Waldo. Any guesses?
Yeah.
Any guesses on the voice of Waldo?
No idea.
SNL star Phil Hartman was the voice of Waldo on the Hot for Teacher video.
Phil Hartman. What a shame that we lost him so soon.
Yeah, very much so.
I was just talking to Colleen about News Radio, and News Radio wasn't one of my favorite shows, but every time I watched it, basically just watch it for Phil Hartman. He was
He's
just
so talented, so funny. Yes.
Oh, and then the other Phil Hartman reference was, we were talking about Caveman Lawyer just earlier today.
I'm just a frozen caveman lawyer. What do I know?
So, oh my gosh, Hartman came up twice today, or three times now.
The shout out to Bez, Mike Besner.
Uh-huh.
The thing I might have laughed the most about in my life, it was, we annoyed the heck out of John Schwartz. We were somewhere and we were watching SNL, and the Tonto Lone Ranger and Frankenstein clip came on, and me and Bez could not stop laughing. We just kept laughing and laughing and laughing, and we annoyed the hell out of Schwartz.
Oh God, that's such a funny sketch. Hartman doesn't keep it together by the end, right?
No, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. So,
all right. So, track 7, I'll Wait.
do you know who co-wrote that with Eddie?
Oh, I sure do. Michael, Yamo Be There, McDonald.
Won't be there. Yep.
Yamo Be There, by the way, was the number 99 song from 1984. So Michael McDonald was present at the time.
Absolutely. Well, and Templeman worked with the Doobies. So Templeman worked with the Doobies, he worked with Van Halen, and that's kind of the connection. So
so the quote that I saw from Michael McDonald was, "Yeah, I was in the Doobie Brothers. We made a lot of really popular albums, sold a lot of albums, but nothing like 1984. Co-writing that song was one of the most lucrative things he ever did."
I can imagine.
Yeah,
seriously,
because you get a credit on on 1/8 of the album, and it sells 10 million. You make a chunk of change on that.
Yep, that's just crazy. Yeah.
Let's talk about the song.
So great song. It's it's a mid-tempo rock song with it's got synth pop ballad type feel to it. It's kind of haunting, just amazing song. I remember this song would be one that would come on like when I was at roller skating, like at I don't remember the name of the I can't remember the name of the
Skateway 9.
Skateway 9, yes. I couldn't remember the name of the place. So I'll Wait would come on, and songs like that, and Jump would come on, and it's like it was the power ballad time. You get I'll Wait, and you get a couple of like, okay,
is that when you'd find a girl to go?
That's when you'd see the people skating around. I think it was probably not my prime at that point. So
it's interesting. So I didn't look. I knew Michael McDonald co-wrote it, but did DLR get a writing credit on this at all?
I'm not sure, to be very honest.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. The reason I ask is because, to me, I hear this song and I hear a 5150 song. I could totally hear Sammy singing this, and I feel like it would fit really easily into 5150. Not that it's not great here, but it's sort of different than the rest of the album. I feel like this one's sort of an outlier compared to the rest of the album.
I'm just checking to see. I don't see a song was written in collaboration between Van Halen and Doobie Brothers singer Michael McDonald, who was brought in by Templeman when David Lee Roth had trouble completing the melody and lyrics. So the band plus Michael McDonald.
And I do feel like this song doesn't sound like a DLR song.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't. It's more of a rock song than it. David Lee has a lot more jazz and bluesy sensibilities. When you get the David Lee inspired songs, you get a lot of blues, a lot of jazz, a lot of that type stuff, and that kind of is contra to what you get with Eddie with the rock pop synth whatnot. So I think they juxtapose really nicely, but they couldn't coexist.
Yeah. And over a long period of time, too. Like their collaboration really, I think, ran its course because there was just too much of a difference of where they wanted to go. And it was time. All right. So we're almost, we're getting to the back end here. So we've got track number 8, Girl Gone Bad.
So you got another energetic rock song, great guitar riff. And this is one, this is a David Lee Roth inspired lyric. He spurned by a girlfriend. He wrote a spurned guy song.
But it's cool because so David wrote the lyrics, but the music for this was composed, of course, by Ed. And apparently the way he did this was he and Valerie Bertinelli, his wife at the time, were traveling and they were in a hotel room and she was asleep in bed and he just had the song like it was coming out of him. So he was like humming it to himself, and then he had like a little micro cassette recorder, today's iPhone, voice memos, but then he had a micro cassette recorder. He goes into a closet and he starts like recording the music for this, not even him playing it, but really just him humming it to come up with the music for this. And he did this in the hotel room closet.
And another song where Michael Anthony, I think, shines in the harmonies. I think you get a lot of really nice harmonies on this one with Michael Anthony.
This is one of those where I only realized that back in the day, I pretty much stopped after I'll Wait because I didn't remember these last 2 songs. But this one's really good. This is a good rock song.
Yeah,
I was surprised by how good it was. Anything else on Girl Gone Bad?
No, I think we got to bring it home with House of Pain.
All right, let's do it.
All right, so it is a dark, heavy song. This is the closer that's really about pain and revenge and really kind of heavy metal-ish feeling to it, right? You got really heavy guitars on this one.
Yeah, this one is it's a cool song, but definitely just not one of my favorites. I think it's good to be here. Plus it's, a 30-minute album, so you need to finish it up. But I like it, but I definitely like the rest of the album a little bit better.
So I love the track. I mean, for me, it's like picking amongst favorites. So I love the track. I think it's an awesome way to close out, on a really strong, heavy rock note. So
okay. So anything else? Any final comments on 1984 before we get to the draft?
I'll just say this, that I had so much fun going back and listening to this album over and over again. I'm going to struggle with the song draft. Like, I'm kind of dreading this because I don't have no idea what the heck to pick because I love all of the damn songs on this album and I'm at a loss for what the heck I'm going to do. So you might get some help from me just, vapor locking on this one, Tom.
But see, I think that you're looking at it the wrong way. This is it's all gravy because you love them all. So you can't go wrong. So think about it this way. There's no way that you're going to pick bad.
Fair enough.
So I don't remember. So where did
you got to pick first on Led Zeppelin because you picked rock and roll and I got Stairway to Heaven second because you didn't pick Stairway to Heaven first.
Wow.
So I get to pick first on 1984, which I am both excited and struggling with because I don't know what to pick first. So let's just remind the folks out there, Tone, what specifically our song draft it is. Every week, Tony and I, when we wrap up our track review, we like to have a little competition. So we do what we call our song draft. And every album, we take turns picking tracks from the album and we create a little team of songs. Tony picks a team of songs, I pick a team of songs. We alternate picks until each of us has a team of songs, and we'll share a link to a Google form and ask you all to vote. Who picked the better team of songs for our song draft? Tony thinks he's going to win. I think I'm going to win. And we put it out there to our fans to decide who truly wins the song draft.
All right. So picking first, Bill, number one.
So I've got three choices here, and that's my problem. So I've been like really legitimately struggling with which one of three songs to pick for days now.
That's not a problem. That means you're going to get two of your top three guaranteed. This is a win.
And you know what? I'm going to change what I was originally planning. And I'm going to pick Hot for Teacher number one.
This is why you can't go wrong, because any way you slice it, you're going to get three all-timers. I mean, two all-timers in the first three. So you may as well take your favorite. If that's Hot for Teacher, good for you. I'm going to go Jump. I'm not the ultimate Van Halen fan. I couldn't decide between Jump and Panama, but I said, you know what? Jump is, really just an iconic song. So I went Jump.
Ultimately, it was between Hot for Teacher, Jump, and Panama, and I figured I wanted Hot for Teacher in Panama. I would take Hot for Teacher first, and figured you would take Jump second.
Yeah, so exactly. And this is why you couldn't lose. So go through the formality of taking Panama.
Panama number three.
I'll wait number four.
I'm going to take Drop Dead Legs.
Top Jimmy.
I'll take Girl Gone Bad.
And House of Pain.
Jump around, jump up and get down. Sorry, had to do that.
I was hoping that there was, some way that Drop Dead Legs would come to me on that third round, because that would really have made me feel great about my draft.
I was hoping to figure out a way to get Drop Dead Legs and Top Jimmy. I couldn't see a way, so I chose Drop Dead Legs.
So recap.
All right, so recap. I got to pick first, and I picked Hot for Teacher first. With my second pick, number 3 overall, I picked Panama. With my third pick, number 5 overall, Drop Dead Legs. And with my fourth pick, number 7 overall, Girl Gone Bad.
My first pick, number 2 overall, was Jump, I'll Wait, Top Jimmy, and House of Pain. So final thoughts. I'll start us off, Bill. I liked this album better than I remembered. And even Colleen, and Call, sorry for the multiple shout outs here, but as we were listening to it over the past week or so, she knew every song up through I'll Wait, kind of like me. And she was surprised. She goes, oh, I didn't know that I knew these songs. But like, she's humming along to Top Jimmy and Drop Dead Legs. And she goes, I didn't even remember I knew these songs. So this album was really, important for people our age, and really a lot of much better songs than I remember. It's not incredible art lyrically, but it's great rock music.
So I was starting to tell you something before we started recording, and I said, nope, I'm going to save it. I'm not going to say it. So I'm going to say it now. This might be the prep that I've been most nervous about doing. I don't want to let the album down. So really, I hope I did a good job today, because this album means so much to me. This album is an album that I grew up with. It's an album, it might be the album that I've listened to the most of any album ever. This and 5150. Those two albums are probably the two albums I've listened to the most of any albums, period. And it just meant a lot to me. 13 years old through, teenage years, kind of a shy kid, this album meant a lot to me. And it really, when I think of like I said, the soundtrack of my teenage years, I can't not hear these songs. So I was nervous doing this. I didn't want to forget something. I didn't want to not have some cool things to say, probably more than any other podcast that we've done so far, including the very first one. So the album means a lot to me. It was a lot of fun to revisit that.
I totally get what you're saying. I felt zero stress about most of these shows. Really, the show that I was most stressed about was the Taylor show, because I love Taylor. But when I go into these, I'm like, oh yeah, this is pretty fun. This is pretty interesting, but they're not super important to me. So I get what you're saying. So I think you did a great job. I appreciate that we got a chance to talk about this album. And really revisit Van Halen, because I'd kind of forgotten how much Van Halen I'd listened to. And even though we were doing 1984, I'd be lying if I said I didn't listen to 5150 a couple of times. And I'd welcome, maybe not next season, but in a future season, I'd love to do 5150, because that's a really good album.
I would love to do 5150 in another
Yeah.
season. Yes. So I think that's a deal. We will definitely revisit Van Halen.
Sweet. All right. So that leaves us in our last segment, which is the most important part of this show. Bill, where does this album rank in your personal top 500? Before you answer this, let's just remind everyone, for his pantheon of albums, his ranking of the top 500, it's not his ranking of favorites. This exercise is a combination of what does he like, but then also his own analysis of importance in music history, quality of the lyrics and the musicianship and all that. So it's an alchemy of things to get to this ranking, which doesn't necessarily mean it's his most favorite. Is that fair to say, Bill?
And Al, that is very fair to say, and I think you stated it really, really well. And I really gravitate towards your use of alchemy there, because it really very much is. It's a feeling. It's an art, not a science. I track this in a spreadsheet. I'm very kind of meticulous about it, and I just have fun doing it. So I have thousands of albums in that spreadsheet, and this is one of them. And I rate this my number 55 album of all time. I feel like it firmly belongs in the top 100. I understand it's not on Rolling Stone's list, and I don't really care. It's, in my mind, an album that had a big impact. When we talk about the use of the synthesizers, we talked about specifically the push and pull between Eddie and David Lee. I think this album, for when it came out in the 80s, was a very impactful album, and I think it impacted a lot that happened after that musically.
I think
it deserves consideration as a top album of all time.
I agree with you. I think that the importance of this album and bringing synthesizers, for better or for worse, it happened. So it was influential. And to me, that's part of what Rolling Stone should be considering. And if you take that into account, I think it kind of doesn't make sense that this isn't on the list, but Captain Beefheart is.
Exactly. Well said. Completely agree. So
on the Led Zeppelin show, we were talking about 1027 and K-Rock and NEW, and they used to do this thing called Desert Island Discs. I feel like this album would be on your Desert Island, even though it's number 55.
100%. So again, you said it right. What my rating is what I think are the best albums of all time, not my favorites. This is one of my favorites. If I were to pick favorites, this would be in my top 20 favorite albums of all time.
Maybe when we are on hiatus in between seasons, we'll do a Desert Island Discs show.
A Desert Island Discs show would be very fun. Yes.
Cool. Okay, so that takes us to the end. So everyone, thanks for listening to another B&T Excellent Adventure in Music. Our next episode will be
Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic by the Chili Peppers.
Thanks for listening, everybody. See you next week.
Thanks, everybody.